The rain poured down in sheets that November evening, turning the city streets into rivers of reflected light. Inside the glass-walled boardroom on the 42nd floor, Elena Harper stood alone, her designer suit soaked from the dash through the storm. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and whispered the words she had never allowed anyone to hear. "I can't do this alone." Her voice broke like the thunder outside. The empire she had built with her own hands was crumbling, and for the first time in 15 years, the strongest woman in Chicago was terrified. Elena was the kind of woman people wrote magazine covers about. At 38, she ran Harper Global, a company that employed thousands and moved millions every day. She had been on the Forbes list since she was 31. People called her unbreakable, but that night, with a bank threatening to pull the loan that kept her company breathing, with her mother's cancer treatments draining every spare dollar, and with the weight of pretending she was fine crushing her chest, Elena Harper finally cracked. Downstairs in the lobby, a security guard watched a tired man in a worn jacket shake rain from his umbrella. Mark Rivera carried a small pink backpack that clearly didn't belong to him. He was supposed to pick up his daughter Sophie from after-school care 20 minutes ago, but the late buzz and the storm had ruined everything. He worked janitorial night shifts at Harper Tower to keep the lights on after his wife walked out 2 years earlier. He never complained. He just kept showing up, mopping floors and smiling at anyone who looked like they needed it. That evening the elevator was out of order, so Mark took the stairs all the way to the executive floor to retrieve the master key he had accidentally left in a conference room. When he reached the top, he heard crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just the quiet, broken kind that slips out when someone believes they're completely alone. He hesitated outside the boardroom door. Every instinct told him to walk away. This wasn't his business, but something stronger than instinct tugged at his heart. He knocked gently. "Ms. Harper, it's Mark from maintenance. Everything okay in there?" Silence. Then the door opened a crack. Elena's eyes were red, her mascara smudged, but her voice tried to stay sharp. "I'm fine. Please go." Mark didn't move. "Ma'am, I don't mean to bother you, but you don't sound fine. And I've got a little girl who cries the same way when she thinks no one is listening. Sometimes it helps to know someone is." Elena stared at this stranger in the faded jacket holding a child's glittery backpack. Something in his kind, tired eyes made the walls she had spent years building crumble just a little more. She stepped back. "Come in," she said, barely above a whisper. Mark stepped into the boardroom and closed the door softly behind him. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windows, painting them both in silver and shadow. He set the pink backpack on the floor and stood there, unsure what to do with his hands. Elena turned away, wiping her face with the sleeve of her blazer as if she could erase the evidence of weakness. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said, trying to pull the CEO mask back on. "I'll be out of your way in a minute." "You're not in my way," Mark answered quietly, "and there's no one else up here tonight." Storm scared everybody home early. Elena laughed once, a brittle sound. "Lucky them, some of us don't have homes to go to right now." Mark glanced at the papers scattered across the table, bank letters stamped in angry red, medical bills with numbers that made his stomach drop. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood fear when he saw it. He had lived with it every day since his wife left, and the hospital visits for Sophia's asthma started stacking up. "My mom is dying," Elena said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "Stage 4, and the treatment that might buy her a few more months costs more than most people make in a lifetime. The company is leveraged to the hilt. One wrong move and thousands of families lose their jobs, including yours. I have been carrying this alone for so long I forgot what it feels like to breathe." Mark listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence felt gentle instead of heavy. "I don't have money or power," he said at last, "but I know what it's like to feel the world sitting on your chest at 3 in the morning. My Sophie, she's 7. Her inhalers went up again last month. Some nights I count pennies in the dark and pray tomorrow is Elena looked at him, really looked for the first time. This man who cleaned her building at midnight was telling her his own heart was breaking, and he was still standing there, asking nothing. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Because somebody was kind to me once, when I was too proud to ask, Mark said. A lady at church paid for Sophie's medicine when I was short. She didn't know me either, said it wasn't charity, just neighbors looking out for neighbors. I promised myself I'd pass it on when I could. Elena sank into one of the leather chairs. The tears came again, but slower this time, like something inside her was finally allowed to rest. Mark pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket, the kind with tiny embroidered daisies that Sophie had picked out for father, and handed it over without a word. After a long moment, Elena whispered, "I don't know how to let someone help me. I never have." "That's okay," Mark said. "We can start small. How about I make us some coffee from the break room? Real coffee. Not that fancy machine stuff. My mom taught me it tastes better when life is falling apart." Elena almost smiled. "I'd like that." While he was gone, she stared at the little pink backpack on the floor. Something about its glitter and worn straps made the boardroom feel less cold. When Mark returned carrying 2 steaming mugs, she took hers with shaking hands. "Thank you," she said. "Anytime," he answered. And for the first time in years, Elena believed that might actually be true. Weeks slipped by, and the storm that started everything never really left. Elena kept showing up at the office earlier, staying later, running on caffeine and determination. Mark kept crossing her path in quiet ways, a fresh pot of coffee waiting when she arrived at dawn. The trash emptied before she noticed it was full. A small note on her desk that simply read, "You don't have to smile today if you don't feel it." She never caught him leaving the notes, but she knew. One Thursday in December, the bank delivered the final notice. Unless Harper Globo secured an additional $15 million by the end of the month, they would call in the loan. Elena stood in the empty executive washroom and vomited from pure panic. When she looked in the mirror, the woman staring back looked like a stranger. Hollow eyes, gray skin, lips pressed so tight they had lost color. That same night, Mark found her asleep at her desk, cheeked against a stack of foreclosure papers, one hand still clutching her mother's rosary. He draped his old work jacket over her shoulders and sat in the corner until she woke an hour later, startled and ashamed. "You shouldn't be here," she mumbled. "Neither should you." Sighed Hentley. "Not like this. When's the last time you ate?" She couldn't remember. Mark disappeared and came back with a warm container of his sister's chicken soup. Elena ate 3 spoonfuls before the tears started again. "I'm going to lose everything," she whispered. "My mother will die without the treatment. Thousands of people will lose their jobs right before Christmas. And I am too proud to beg the investors for more time because they want my head on a platter." Mark listened the way he always did, quiet, steady, present. When she finished, he spoke so softly she almost missed it. "My Sophia asked me last night why Ms. Elena looks sad even when she smiles. Kids see things we try to hide." I didn't have an answer for her. Elena closed her eyes. "I don't want your daughter to see me like this." "Then let me help carry it," Mark said. "I'm not rich. I'm not powerful. But I'm here every night, and I'm stubborn. Sometimes stubborn is enough." She wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand the size of the mountain. Instead, she heard herself say, "I'm scared, Mark. I'm so scared." "I know," he answered. "Fear's a heavy thing, but it gets lighter when 2 people hold it." The next morning, Elena's mother was rushed to the hospital with pneumonia. The doctors pulled her aside. "We can keep her comfortable, but without the specialized treatment in Houston, she has weeks, maybe less." Elena walked out of the hospital into a gray dawn and drove straight to the office. She sat in the parking garage and cried until there was nothing left. When she finally stepped into the lobby, Mark was waiting with Sophie by his side. The little girl held a crumpled piece of paper. "Daddy said you're sad," Sophie announced. "So I made you something." It was a drawing stick figure, Elena, with a huge smile, holding hands with a smaller stick figure wearing a cape. Underneath, in purple crayon, "You are my hero, because you help people." Elena knelt, tears spilling again, and hugged the child she had never officially met. Sophie hugged back without hesitation. That was the moment Elena stopped fighting alone. Christmas Eve fell on a Monday that year. The city sparkled with lights, But inside Harper Tower, the halls were dark and quiet. Almost everyone had been sent home with full pay and a bonus Elena could barely afford. She sat alone in her office, signing the papers that would hand controlling interest to a group of investors who had agreed to save the company at the price of her title and her vision. Mark knocked once and came in carrying 2 paper cups of hot chocolate and a small paper bag. Sophie trailed behind him, wearing red reindeer antlers and clutching a tiny gift wrapped in newspaper. "We're not supposed to be here," Elena said, managing half a smile. "Buildings closed. Sophie needs to give you your present before Santa comes," Mark unsweated. "And I figured you shouldn't be alone tonight." Sophie climbed onto the big leather couch and patted the spot beside her. Elena sat. The little girl placed the newspaper package in her lap. "Open it," Sophie whispered, eyes shining brighter than the city outside. Inside was a clay ornament, lopsided and painted with careful strokes of gold and blue. It was a star with the words, "You are enough," written in a child's wobbly letters. "I made it in school," Sophie said proudly. "Teacher said we should give it to someone who needs to know they're special." Daddy said, "That's you." Elena held the star like it might break. Tears fell onto the clay, and she didn't bother hiding them anymore. Mark spoke softly. "There's something else. I did something maybe I shouldn't have." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were hundreds of handwritten notes, some on printer paper, some on napkins, some in. At the bottom was a cashier's check for $15 million. Elena stared, unable to breathe. "Every night for the last 3 weeks," Mark explained, "I posted a short message on the company's internal message board. No names. Just said there was someone who had always taken care of us, and now she needed us to take care of her. I told them about a mom fighting cancer and a daughter trying to keep her safe." People started leaving envelopes at the front desk. Some gave $10. Some gave $1,000. A few gave more than I'll ever understand. The night janitors, the mailroom kids, the cafeteria ladies, even executives who never speak to me, they all showed up. Elena's hands shook as she read the notes. From Maria in accounting. "You gave me maternity leave when my twins came early. This is the least I can do." From Jamal in shipping. "You kept my crew working through the pandemic. We keep you now." From someone anonymous. "My bonus this year is your mother's treatment. Pay it forward when you can." The total sat there in black and white. $15,000,012. Mark shrugged, eyes wet. "Turns out, when you've spent years being kind in the small ways, people remember. They just needed someone to tell them how to help." Elena looked at Sophie, then at Mark, then at the mountain of love poured out by strangers who had become family. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already did," Mark said. "Every day you showed up for us. Tonight, we showed up for you." Sophie yawned and curled against Elena's side, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Within minutes, the child was asleep, tiny hand still clutching Elena's sleeve. Mark stood to leave them in peace, but Elena reached out and caught his wrist. "Stay," she said. "Please. Just for tonight." "So? Estale." And somewhere between the quiet breathing of a sleeping child and the soft glow of city lights, Elena Harper learned that strength doesn't always look like standing alone. Sometimes it looks like letting others stand with you. Christmas morning arrived soft and white, the first snow of the season blanketing the city in hush. Elena woke on the wide leather couch in her office, with Sophie tucked against her side and Mark asleep in the chair across from them, neck bent at an impossible angle. For a moment she simply watched them breathe, afraid to move and break whatever fragile miracle had settled over the room. The clay star hung from the edge of her desk lamp now, catching the pale light. Elena reached for the envelope again and read the notes one more time, slower, letting every word sink in. When Sophie stirred and blinked up at her with sleepy eyes, Elena brushed the curls from the little girl's forehead. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Sophie smiled a kind of smile only children wake up with on Christmas morning. "Daddy said Santa might bring you something better than toys this year." Elena looked at Mark, who was rubbing the back of his neck and trying to pretend he hadn't been snoring. He met her eyes and gave the smallest nod, as if to say, "See?" Told you it gets lighter when we carry it together. By noon, the three of them stood outside the hospital. Elena's mother, weak but awake, held the clay star in trembling fingers, while Sophie explained very seriously that it was magic and would help her get better. The doctor came in later with new paperwork, full funding approved for the Houston treatment starting January 2nd. A donor wished to remain anonymous, he said, but wanted Mrs. Harper to know the money came from people who loved her daughter very much. Elena's mother looked straight at Mark, then at Sophie, then at the star. "I think I already know who they are," she whispered, and pulled Sophie into the bed for a careful hug. That afternoon, Elena called the bank and tore up the surrender papers on speakerphone while the stunned executive listened. Harper Global would remain hers. The employees would keep their jobs, and the $15 million plus 12 cents would be placed in a foundation called the Star Fund, created to help any employee facing medical crisis or hardship. No questions, no shame, just neighbors looking out for neighbors. January brought changes no one saw coming. Elena moved her mother into the guest wing of her downtown penthouse so nurses could come and go easily. She insisted Mark and Sophie take the apartment across the hall rent-free. "Forever, because," she said, "family should stay close." Mark argued for exactly 30 seconds before Sophie jumped up and down shouting, "We get to have sleepovers every day," and the matter was settled. Some evenings Elena came home to find Sophie teaching her mother how to paint watercolors at the kitchen table. Some mornings Mark left 2 mugs of terrible coffee on the counter, one for Elena before she faced the world, one for himself before he faced another double shift he no longer needed but still took because some habits are about pride. One warm night in spring, Elena stood on the balcony watching the city settle into twilight. Mark joined her, hands in his pockets, the way he still did when he wasn't sure he belonged. "I used to think success meant never needing anyone," she said quietly. "And now I think success sounds like a 7-year-old laughing in the next room and a good man leaving daisies on my desk when he thinks I am not looking." Mark smiled, the slow, quiet smile that had started everything. "I was never very good at sneaking." Elena turned to him then. No walls left to hide behind. "Thank you for stepping in when it mattered most." "Thank you for letting me," he answered. Far below them, the city moved on, millions of lives, millions of stories, but up here, on the 32nd floor, 3 hearts that had once been breaking beat stronger because they had learned to beat together. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change someone's world. Share this story if it touched your heart.